On a hillside above Beverly Hills, hidden behind iron gates and towering hedges, stands a limestone palace that looks like it was lifted from the English countryside and placed under the California sun. Greystone Mansion rises from manicured lawns, its gray stone walls catching the light in a way that seems almost ethereal. 55 rooms stretch across 46,000 square feet. Formal gardens cascade down the slope. A bowling alley and billiard room wait in silence. From certain windows, you can see all the way to the Pacific Ocean, a view that once belonged to oil and power and unimaginable wealth. But walk through those rooms today and you'll feel something else beneath the beauty, a heaviness, a shadow that no amount of sunlight can erase. Because Greystone Mansion wasn't just the crowning achievement of an oil empire, it became its tomb. On a cold February night in 1929, just months after the family moved in, 2 gunshots shattered the silence. By morning, the heir to one of America's greatest fortunes lay dead in a guest bedroom. His secretary lay dead beside him. The official story claimed that a trusted employee had lost his mind and done them both in before the authorities could arrive. But whispers told a different tale, one involving corruption, blackmail, and secrets powerful enough to destroy a dynasty. The deaths were never fully explained, the questions were never answered, and the mansion that was meant to crown an empire instead became the symbol of its collapse. Some say Greystone was cursed from the moment its foundation was laid. Others say the curse began long before, in oil fields soaked with ambition and stained by scandal. Either way, the story of Greystone is the story of how wealth built on shadows can never escape the darkness. To understand Greystone, you must first understand the man who built it, Edward Lawrence Doheny. His story reads like the American dream, written in oil and ambition. Born in 1856 in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, Edward grew up with nothing. His father worked odd jobs. His mother struggled to keep food on the table. When Edward was old enough, he headed west, like so many young men of his generation, searching for fortune in the raw landscapes of the frontier. He tried everything. He worked as a mule packer in New Mexico. He prospected for gold and silver in Arizona and Mexico, sleeping under stars, eating whatever he could hunt or trade for. He dug through rock and sand with his bare hands, chasing rumors of strikes that never materialized. For years, he lived on the edge of poverty, always one step away from finding his fortune, never quite reaching it. The desert sun burned his skin. The cold mountain nights left him shivering in thin blankets. He watched other men strike it rich while his own pockets stayed empty. But Edward refused to give up. Failure only hardened his determination. Then, in his 30s, tired and worn down by decades of disappointment, Edward settled in Los Angeles. The city was still small then, dusty and unremarkable, hardly the sprawling metropolis it would become. Most people passed through on their way to somewhere else. But Edward, now married to his first wife Carrie, decided to stay. He scraped together what little money he had and began looking for something different: oil. In 1892, on a vacant lot near downtown Los Angeles, Edward Doheny and his partner Charles Canfield began digging. They didn't have fancy equipment or wealthy investors backing them. They used a sharpened eucalyptus tree trunk as a drill. They worked by hand hour after hour, day after day, driving that wooden drill deeper into the California soil. Their hands blistered and bled. Their backs ached. The neighbors thought they were insane, 2 more foolish dreamers wasting their time on an impossible venture. But on a day in November, at 460 feet, the drill broke through. Oil surged up from the earth, thick and black and valuable. It was the first successful oil well in the Los Angeles basin, and it changed everything. Within months, the city transformed. Oil derricks sprouted like iron forests across Los Angeles. Land that had been worthless overnight became priceless. Edward Doheny, the broke prospector who had spent decades chasing dreams through deserts and mountains, suddenly found himself at the center of a fortune so large it seemed unreal. He didn't stop. He couldn't. The hunger that had driven him through all those years of failure now drove him toward even greater success. He expanded. He bought land across California and Mexico. His wells produced millions of barrels. His wealth grew into tens of millions, then hundreds of millions. By the early 1900s, Edward L. Doheny was one of the richest men in America, a titan of the oil industry, a king among millionaires. He moved into a mansion in Los Angeles. He built a second estate. He surrounded himself with art, luxury, and power. After his first wife died, he married Carrie Estelle Betzold, a woman of grace and intelligence who stood beside him as his fortune climbed higher and higher. Together, they had one son, Edward Lawrence Doheny Jr., known to everyone as Ned. Ned grew up in a world his father could never have imagined as a child. Private schools, European travel, society parties, the finest clothes and the best education money could buy. He was charming, handsome, and well-liked. Tall and athletic, with an easy smile and natural charisma, Ned moved through elite social circles with confidence. He served in the Navy during World War I and returned home a decorated officer, praised for his leadership and courage. In 1921, Ned married Lucy Marceline Smith, a beautiful young woman from a prominent family. The wedding was one of the social events of the season, attended by Los Angeles' wealthiest and most influential families. Edward Doheny loved his son more than anything. He saw in Ned everything he himself had never been: educated, refined, accepted by society. He wanted to give Ned the kind of life he himself had never known. He wanted to build something that would last forever, something that would crown the Doheny name with glory and establish the family among America's aristocracy. So, in the mid-1920s, as his oil empire reached its peak, he decided to build Ned a house. Not just any house, a palace, a monument, a masterpiece that would stand as proof that the Doheny family had arrived at the pinnacle of American society. He chose 18 acres on a hillside in Beverly Hills, high above the city, where the air was clean and the view stretched forever. The land itself cost a fortune. The construction would cost even more. Edward didn't care. Money, after all those years of poverty, had become almost meaningless. This was for Ned. This was for legacy. This was for immortality. This was Greystone. In 1927, construction began. The architect was Gordon Kaufman, a brilliant designer who had studied the great estates of England and Europe. Kaufman had recently emigrated from England and brought with him a deep understanding of classical architecture and Gothic design. Edward Doheny told him to spare no expense. Build something that will last 1,000 years. Build something that feels like royalty. Build something that will make people stop and stare in wonder. Kaufman delivered. The mansion was designed in the English Gothic Revival style, with influences from Tudor manor houses and medieval castles. The exterior was clad in gray Indiana limestone, shipped across the country at enormous cost. Each block was carefully selected, cut, and fitted. The stone gave the building a timeless, almost ancient quality, as if it had stood on that hillside for centuries rather than being newly built. The roof used slate tiles imported from Vermont. The windows were leaded glass, each pane handcrafted. The doors were solid oak, carved with intricate details. Every material was chosen for beauty and permanence. This was not a house that would age or decay. This was a structure built to outlast generations. The main house contained 55 rooms spread across multiple floors. The grand entry hall featured a sweeping staircase, carved wood paneling that reached to the ceiling, and a floor of polished marble. Walking into Greystone for the first time felt like entering a European palace. The living room was designed to host grand parties, with space for 100 guests to mingle comfortably. Tall windows flooded the room with natural light. The dining room could seat dozens around a table long enough to accommodate formal state dinners. A library held thousands of books, its shelves lined floor to ceiling with leather-bound volumes. There were sitting rooms, music rooms, sunrooms, and private chambers for family and guests. Beneath the main floors, a basement level included service areas, storage, and some of the most unusual features of the estate. A bowling alley stretched the length of a city block, complete with polished lanes and a professional setup. A billiard room offered space for games and smoking, its walls paneled in dark wood that gave it the atmosphere of a private gentleman's club. There were wine cellars capable of storing thousands of bottles, silver vaults to protect the family's valuable tableware, and a network of hallways where staff could move unseen, ensuring that the family's needs were met without disrupting the atmosphere of elegance above. The estate's grounds were just as impressive as the house itself. Formal gardens stretched in geometric patterns, with hedges trimmed to perfection. European landscaping techniques created outdoor rooms, each with its own character and purpose. Fountains bubbled in courtyard spaces. Paths wound through groves of trees carefully selected for their beauty and shade. There was a tennis court surfaced with red clay, a swimming pool lined with imported tile, and open lawns for croquet and garden parties. Stone staircases descended through multiple levels of terracing, creating dramatic views and intimate spaces. From the upper terraces, the view extended across Los Angeles to the ocean, a constant reminder of how far the Doheny fortune had climbed. Inside, the mansion was outfitted with the most modern technology of the era. Central heating and air systems, still rare in private homes, ensured comfort year-round. Elevators connected the floors so that no one had to climb stairs unless they wanted to. A sophisticated intercom system allowed communication between rooms. Fireplaces appeared in nearly every major room, each one faced with imported marble or carved stone. The kitchens were equipped with commercial-grade appliances that could have served a hotel. The bathrooms featured tile work and fixtures that rivaled the finest establishments in the world. The total cost of Greystone was estimated at $3 million to $4 million, an astronomical sum in the 1920s. To put that in perspective, the average American home cost around $5,000. Adjusted for inflation, Greystone would be worth over $60 million today. And that doesn't account for the artistry and craftsmanship that would be nearly impossible to replicate now. But for Edward Doheny, it was worth every penny. This wasn't just a house. It was a symbol, a declaration, a testament to what one man could achieve in a single lifetime. In 1928, the mansion was finished. Ned and Lucy moved in with their 5 children. The family settled into their palace on the hill. Servants bustled through the lower corridors. The children ran through the gardens. Lucy decorated the rooms with furniture and art purchased from Europe. For a brief moment, it seemed like the dream was complete. The Doheny name had reached its highest point. Greystone stood as proof of their success, their power, their permanence. But beneath the surface, cracks were already forming, and those cracks ran all the way back to Washington, D.C., to a scandal that would eventually consume everything the Dohenys had built. In the early 1920s, while Greystone was still being planned, Edward Doheny made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. It involved oil, politics, and a man named Albert Fall. Albert Fall was the Secretary of the Interior under President Warren G. Harding. A former senator from New Mexico, Fall was a hard-drinking, sharp-dealing politician who controlled access to federal oil reserves, including 2 strategically important sites, Elk Hills in California and Teapot Dome in Wyoming. These reserves were set aside for the U.S. Navy, intended to ensure fuel supplies in case of war. But Fall, who was deeply in debt and desperate for money, saw an opportunity to profit from his position. In 1921, Fall quietly leased the Elk Hills Reserve to Edward Doheny's Pan American Petroleum Company. The deal was done behind closed doors, without competitive bidding, without public notice. In return, Doheny gave Fall a loan of $100,000 in cash, delivered in a black bag by Ned Doheny himself. There was no formal contract, no collateral, no expectation of repayment, no paperwork of any kind. It was, for all practical purposes, a bribe. Fall also leased Teapot Dome to another oil baron, Harry F. Sinclair, in exchange for similar payments and gifts. When the deals became public in 1922, a scandal erupted that shook the nation. Congress launched investigations. Newspapers screamed about corruption at the highest levels of government. The Teapot Dome scandal became one of the most infamous episodes of government corruption in American history, a symbol of the moral rot that many believed had infected the Roaring Twenties. The investigations dragged on for years. Albert Fall was convicted of bribery and became the first cabinet member in U.S. history to go to prison. President Harding died in office before the full extent of the scandal emerged, but his administration's reputation was destroyed. But Edward Doheny, despite being the man who paid the bribe, was acquitted. His lawyers argued brilliantly that the $100,000 was merely a personal loan between old friends, not a payment for illegal favors. They painted Doheny as a generous man helping out a friend in need. The jury believed him, or at least couldn't prove otherwise beyond a reasonable doubt. Doheny walked free, but his reputation was destroyed. The man who had built an empire through hard work and determination was now seen as a symbol of corruption. A robber baron who bought politicians and broke the law to increase his already obscene wealth. The scandal followed him everywhere. Business partners distanced themselves. Society whispered behind his back. His name became synonymous with the worst excesses of American capitalism. And though he still had his wealth, the stain on the Doheny name would never wash away. For Ned Doheny, the scandal was a different kind of burden. He was the one who had delivered the black bag of cash to Albert Fall. He was the courier, the messenger, the physical link between his father and the crime. He had walked into Fall's office, set the bag on the desk, and walked out. Though he was never charged with any crime, though he testified and was cleared, the guilt weighed on him. Friends noticed he drank more heavily than before. He became moody, withdrawn. The easy charm that had defined his youth began to crack. And as the 1920s wore on, those around him began to notice that the golden boy of the Doheny family was slowly unraveling. Still, Greystone was finished. The family moved in, and for a few months, life at the mansion seemed almost normal. The children played in the gardens. Lucy hosted teas and dinner parties. Ned went through the motions of being the master of a great estate. But inside, something was breaking. The weight of the scandal, the pressure of living up to his father's expectations, the guilt and the alcohol, it was all too much. Almost. February 16th, 1929, started as an ordinary day at Greystone. Ned Doheny went about his usual routine. His wife Lucy tended to the children, who ranged in age from infants to young teenagers. The staff moved through the house quietly, performing their duties with the invisible efficiency expected in a home of such stature. By evening, the mansion was calm. The children were put to bed. The servants retreated to their quarters. The February air outside was cool and crisp. Around 10 p.m., Lucy went upstairs to check on Ned. She found him in a guest bedroom on the second floor, a room he sometimes used when he didn't want to disturb her. He wasn't alone. His personal secretary, Hugh Plunkett, was with him. The two men were talking, their voices low and serious. Hugh Plunkett had worked for the Doheny family for years. He was in his mid-30s, well-educated, and completely trusted. Loyal beyond question, he managed Ned's schedule, handled correspondence, dealt with business matters, and served as a companion and confidant. The Dohenys paid him generously. He lived on the estate in a separate cottage, comfortable and secure. He was, by all accounts, part of the family. Ned and Hugh spent hours together every day. Some said they were closer than brothers. Lucy said goodnight and left the two men alone. She went to her own room. She changed into her nightclothes. She picked up a book, and then, within the hour, she heard something that made her blood run cold. 2 gunshots, sharp, loud. Echoing through the stone hallways of Greystone, she ran back to the guest bedroom, her bare feet slapping against the cold floors. The door was locked from the inside. She pounded on it, screaming for Ned. There was no answer. She pounded again, harder, her voice rising in panic. Staff members rushed upstairs, awakened by her screams. Someone called the police. Others tried to break down the door, throwing their weight against the heavy oak. Finally, the lock gave way, and the door burst open. Inside, the scene was horrifying. Ned Doheny lay on the floor, a bullet wound in his head. Blood pooled beneath him, soaking into the carpet. He was dead, his eyes open and staring at nothing. Beside him, crumpled near the bed, was Hugh Plunkett. He had a bullet wound in his own head, the gun still in his hand. The room smelled of gunpowder and death. The police arrived within minutes. They examined the scene carefully. They interviewed Lucy, who was hysterical with grief and shock. They interviewed the staff, none of whom had seen or heard anything unusual before the shots. The household had been quiet. There had been no arguments, no raised voices, no sign of trouble. And within hours, the official story began to take shape. The police quickly declared that Plunkett was responsible for the tragedy. According to their theory, Hugh Plunkett had suffered some kind of mental breakdown and ended both their lives. The motive was never clearly established, but authorities suggested that Plunkett had been struggling with mental illness, perhaps triggered by overwork or personal problems. Some reports claimed he had been having financial troubles. Others suggested he had grown resentful of his position as a servant, no matter how well paid. The case was closed quickly, too quickly, some would later say. Edward Doheny, devastated by his son's death, accepted the official story, or at least he didn't publicly challenge it. What could he do? His son was dead. Challenging the police findings would only drag the family through more scandal, more publicity, more pain. A funeral was held at St. Vincent's Church. Ned was buried in a grand mausoleum. Hugh Plunkett was buried separately in a different cemetery with little ceremony and few mourners. His family, humiliated by the accusation of murder, retreated from public view, and Greystone, barely lived in for even a year, was suddenly empty. But the official story never sat right with people who knew the facts. The doubts began almost immediately and have never stopped. Why would Hugh Plunkett, a man with no history of violence or mental illness, suddenly snap and kill his employer? There was no evidence of a fight, no signs of struggle. The room was orderly except for the two bodies. The furniture was undisturbed. Nothing was broken. If Plunkett had gone violently insane, wouldn't there be some sign of chaos? Why were there 2 gunshots? If Plunkett shot Ned and then himself, why was there so little time between the shots? Lucy heard them in quick succession, almost as if they happened simultaneously, one right after the other with barely a breath between. Could one man fire twice that fast? And if so, why? Why wouldn't there be a pause, a moment of hesitation before turning the gun on himself? And why, in a house full of staff and family, did no one hear anything leading up to the violence? No raised voices, no arguments, no sounds of distress. Just silence, then gunfire, then screaming. The walls of Greystone were thick stone, but sound still carried through the halls. If there had been a confrontation, wouldn't someone have heard? Some who examined the case more closely began to whisper a different theory. What if the official story was wrong entirely? What if both men were ended by someone else? What if there was a third person in the room that night? Someone who took both their lives and arranged the scene to look like Plunkett had done them both in? This theory gained traction when people considered the larger context. The Teapot Dome scandal was still fresh in the public mind. Edward Doheny's reputation was in tatters. Ned had been the one to deliver the infamous black bag of cash to Albert Fall, making him a key witness to federal crimes. What if someone wanted to silence him? What if there were secrets he knew? Secrets about corruption that reached even higher than Albert Fall, secrets dangerous enough to kill for? What if powerful men in Washington or the oil industry had decided that Ned Doheny knew too much? There were also whispers about Ned's personal life. Some claimed he had been struggling with alcoholism and depression for years, direct consequences of the guilt he carried from Teapot Dome. His drinking had grown heavier, his moods had grown darker. Friends said he sometimes hinted at dark thoughts, at wanting to escape the pressure and the shame forever. Could there have been a secret arrangement? Had Ned asked Hugh to carry out something unspeakable, with both men knowing neither would survive? A bizarre and tragic conclusion to unbearable pain? Others suggested even darker possibilities, that he and Plunkett had been involved in some kind of personal relationship that went beyond employer and employee, a relationship that, in the conservative society of 1920s America, could never be publicly acknowledged. If that were true, and if someone found out, a blackmailer perhaps, or a family member horrified by the scandal, it could explain why both men ended up dead. Honor killings weren't unheard of in that era, especially among wealthy families desperate to protect their reputations. But none of these theories were ever proven. The police didn't investigate deeply. They didn't want to. A quick ruling that blamed Plunkett for everything closed the case and protected everyone involved from further scrutiny. The Doheny family didn't push for answers, whether out of grief or shame or fear of what might be uncovered if the investigation continued. They let the official story stand. Hugh Plunkett, a loyal servant who had dedicated years of his life to the family, was painted as a madman. Ned Doheny, the golden son who was supposed to inherit an empire, was mourned as a victim of senseless tragedy. And the truth, whatever it was buried with them in separate graves. After Ned's death, Lucy Doheny couldn't bear to stay in the mansion. The place where she had hoped to raise her children and build a life had become a house of death. Every room reminded her of that night. Every hallway echoed with the sound of gunshots. She moved out almost immediately, taking the children with her. They would grow up elsewhere, far from Greystone and its shadows. Edward Doheny, heartbroken and aging rapidly, never set foot in Greystone again. The mansion that was meant to be a gift of love, a symbol of his success and his devotion to his son, became a monument to tragedy. He couldn't even look at it. Staff continued to maintain the property, but the rooms echoed with silence. The gardens grew, but no one walked them. Greystone became a ghost house, inhabited only by memories and what-ifs. For years, Greystone sat mostly empty, a beautiful shell with no life inside. The Doheny family tried to move on, but the shadow of that night never lifted. Edward Doheny died in 1935, just 6 years after his son. He was 79 years old. His fortune, once one of the largest in America, was divided and diminished. The oil empire he had built began to fracture and fade. Without Edward's driving force and without Ned to carry on the legacy, the company lost its direction. Competitors took market share. Legal battles over the Teapot dome, leases drained resources. By the time of Edward's death, the Doheny empire was already in decline. Lucy eventually sold Greystone to the city of Beverly Hills in 1965 for $1.1 million, a fraction of what it cost to build 4 decades earlier. The city turned it into a public park and historic landmark. The mansion became a filming location for movies and television shows, its grand rooms and Gothic architecture providing the perfect backdrop for stories of wealth, mystery, and decay. Ironically, the house built to crown an empire became famous as a set, a place where actors played out fictional dramas, while the real tragedy that had unfolded there was slowly forgotten by the public. But those who worked at Greystone, who walked its halls late at night after tours ended and gates closed, began to tell stories. Security guards reported hearing footsteps echoing through empty corridors when no one else was in the building. Doors that had been carefully locked at night would be found standing open in the morning with no sign of forced entry. Some claimed to see shadows moving through the rooms, dark shapes that vanished when approached or when lights were turned on. There were reports of cold spots, sudden drops in temperature in certain areas of the house that couldn't be explained by drafts or air conditioning. And in the guest bedroom where Ned and Plunkett died, people said they felt an overwhelming sense of sadness, a heaviness that pressed down on them and made it hard to breathe. Some visitors refused to enter that room. Others entered but left quickly, unsettled by feelings they couldn't name. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, there is something undeniably eerie about Greystone. The mansion was built with so much hope, so much ambition, so much love. Edward Doheny poured his fortune and his dreams into those stone walls, and it was all destroyed by violence and secrets in a single night. That kind of tragedy leaves a mark that time cannot erase. It seeps into the walls, it changes the air, it becomes part of the place itself. Even on the sunniest days, when the gardens are blooming and the limestone glows warm in the light, there is a darkness at the heart of Greystone that no amount of beauty can erase. Ned's death was the beginning of the end for the Doheny empire. Edward never recovered from the loss of his son, the oil baron who had once been a titan of industry, who had dragged himself up from poverty through sheer will, became a recluse, haunted by grief and scandal. His company continued to operate, but the heart had gone out of it. The drive that had pushed Edward to succeed, to build, to conquer, died with Ned. The Teapot Dome scandal continued to taint the Doheny name long after the trials ended. Even though Edward had been acquitted in court, the public never forgave him. He was seen as a symbol of everything wrong with the Gilded Age, a man who had bought his way to the top and corrupted the government in the process. When he died in 1935, his obituaries focused as much on the scandal as on his achievements. The oil wells, the fortune, the mansion, all of it was overshadowed by that black bag of cash, and the son who died in the house it helped build. The family fortune was divided among his heirs, but it never regained the concentrated power it had once held. Lucy remarried years later and moved on with her life as best she could. The Doheny children grew up and pursued their own paths, some in business, some in quiet private lives. But Greystone remained, a permanent reminder of the night that changed everything. Over the decades, the mansion took on different roles. It was used for public events, weddings, corporate retreats, garden parties. Film crews transformed it into dozens of different settings: a haunted house in horror films, a mob boss's estate in crime dramas, a presidential mansion in political thrillers, a Gothic castle in period pieces. Movies like The Big Lebowski, There Will Be Blood, Spider-Man 3, and X-Men all filmed scenes at Greystone. Television shows from Columbo to The West Wing used its distinctive rooms. The house that was built to be a private sanctuary became one of the most recognized filming locations in Hollywood, appearing in hundreds of productions. But even as it served these new purposes, the mansion never lost its association with tragedy. Tour guides who lead visitors through the estate always pause at the guest bedroom. They lower their voices and tell the story of that February night. And visitors stand in the room where two men died, looking at the walls, the floor, the windows, and wondering what really happened. Some take photographs, some stand in respectful silence, but everyone feels it. The weight of unanswered questions, the presence of something dark that still lingers. Today, Greystone stands beautifully preserved. The city of Beverly Hills has maintained the estate with care, restoring rooms, preserving original features, and keeping the grounds immaculate. Walking through Greystone is like stepping back into the 1920s. The wood paneling still gleams with the same rich luster. The fireplaces still work, their mantels carved from the same marble. The gardens still bloom in careful geometric patterns, maintained by staff who understand the original vision. The limestone exterior, weathered but strong, still catches the light in that ethereal way. But there is an oddness to the place, a sense that time stopped on February 16, 1929, and never quite started again. The mansion was barely lived in before the tragedy. Ned and Lucy had less than a year in the house. Many of the rooms were never fully furnished. They didn't have time to fill the house with the accumulated possessions of a long life, with the photographs and heirlooms and comfortable clutter that make a house a home. So, the estate has an unfinished quality, as if the family just stepped out for the evening and never returned. The rooms are beautiful but empty, perfect but unlived in, a stage set rather than a home. In some ways, Greystone is a perfect metaphor for the Doheny Empire itself. It was built quickly with vast resources and grand ambitions. It was meant to last forever, to stand as a symbol of success and permanence. But it was also built on a foundation of oil wealth that came from questionable deals and corrupt practices. And when the foundation cracked, when the scandal broke and Ned died, the whole structure became unstable. Edward Doheny wanted to give his son a gift that would endure through generations. Instead, he built a mausoleum. Greystone is beautiful. It is impressive. It is architecturally significant. But it is also haunted by the choices that led to its creation and the violence that marked its first and only true chapter as a family home. What can we learn from the story of Greystone Mansion? Perhaps the most obvious lesson is that wealth alone cannot protect us from tragedy. Edward Doheny built a fortune that would have been unimaginable to the boy who grew up poor in Wisconsin. He rose from absolute poverty to become one of the richest men in the world. He built a mansion that embodied everything he had achieved, but none of it could save his son. None of it could prevent the violence that destroyed his family. In the end, all the money in the world, all the power and influence and beautiful architecture couldn't buy peace or safety or happiness. There is also the lesson about corruption and consequences. The Teapot Dome scandal was supposed to be a simple business deal, a way for Edward Doheny to secure oil leases that would make him even richer than he already was. What was another $100,000 when you had hundreds of millions? But the scandal destroyed his reputation, devastated his son, and ultimately contributed to the tragedy at Greystone. The black bag of cash that Ned delivered to Albert Fall set in motion a chain of events that ended with two bodies on a bedroom floor. Corruption has a price, and sometimes that price is paid not by the person who commits the crime, but by the next generation. Greystone also teaches us about the American dream and its dark side. Edward Doheny's story is, in many ways, the classic rags to riches tale that America loves to celebrate. He started with nothing and built an empire through hard work, determination, and a little bit of luck. He proved that anyone, no matter how poor, could make it to the top. But the dream turned into a nightmare. The mansion he built to crown his success became the symbol of his failure. The son he loved and wanted to protect died violently in a house meant to keep him safe. The empire crumbled. The name was ruined. In the end, the American dream consumed the dreamer. And finally, Greystone reminds us that some mysteries are never solved. We will never know for certain what happened in that guest bedroom on February 16, 1929. Was it truly what the police claimed? One man responsible for both deaths? Was it a double elimination covered up by powerful forces? Was it an agreement between two men who saw no other way out? The truth died with Ned Doheny and Hugh Plunkett. All we have are questions, theories, whispers, and the silent testimony of the mansion itself. Today, visitors to Greystone walk through rooms that feel both grand and empty. They admire the architecture, the craftsmanship, the sweeping views. They take photographs in the gardens, standing where Lucy once stood, where the children once played. They imagine what it must have been like to live in such a place, to wake up in a palace every morning. But underneath the beauty, there is always the awareness of what happened here. The tragedy is inescapable. It is woven into the fabric of the house like a thread that runs through every room, every hallway, every stone. Some say that Greystone is cursed, that the wealth used to build it was tainted from the beginning, earned through deals that bent the law and broke the trust of the American people, that the mansion itself was doomed before the first stone was laid, marked by the corruption that financed its construction. Whether you believe in curses or not, it's hard to deny that Greystone's history is remarkably dark. One family, one night, two deaths, and an empire that crumbled into dust. Others say that Greystone is simply a reminder of how fragile success can be. Edward Doheny spent decades building his fortune. He survived boom and bust, competition and challenge, poverty and hardship. He made it to the very top of American society, higher than he ever dreamed possible as a boy in Wisconsin. But all of that success, all of that wealth, all of that power couldn't prevent the destruction of what mattered most to him, his family. One night erased decades of work. One tragedy destroyed a dynasty. The mansion stands as a monument to ambition, to the heights one man could reach, and to the depths of tragedy that can follow. It is a place of beauty and horror, of grandeur and grief, and it will stand on that hillside above Beverly Hills for decades to come, perhaps centuries, a silent witness to a story that America would rather forget. If you visit Greystone today, go in the late afternoon, when the sunlight is golden and the shadows are long. Walk through the gardens slowly, stand on the terrace and look out over the city spreading below. Feel the weight of the place pressing down on you. And when you step inside, when you walk through those grand rooms with their carved wood and stone fireplaces, remember that this was not always a movie set or a public park. This was someone's home, someone's dream. It was built by a father who wanted to give his son the world. It was meant to be a palace of joy, a place where children would grow and generations would gather, and the Doheny name would live forever in stone and memory. Instead, it became the site of a tragedy that destroyed an empire and left questions that will never be answered. Greystone Mansion is many things. It is beautiful, undeniably so. It is historic, a landmark of 1920s architecture and design. It is architecturally significant, studied by students and admired by experts. But more than anything, it is a reminder that no amount of wealth can protect us from the darkness that lives in human hearts, that the grandest dreams can become nightmares, that empires built on shadows will eventually be consumed by them. The Greystone walls rise against the California sky, elegant and eternal. But look closely, and you can see the cracks, the places where time and tragedy have left their marks. Listen carefully, and you can hear the echoes that refuse to fade. 2 gunshots, a family destroyed, an empire that fell not from the outside, but from within, destroyed by its own corruption and secrets. Greystone stands, but the Doheny name is gone, remembered now only in history books and scandal. The oil empire is dust, broken up and absorbed by other companies. And all that remains is the mansion, beautiful and empty, haunted by the ghosts of ambition, corruption, and tragedy. A palace that was meant to last forever, but destroyed everything it touched. This is the dark story of Greystone, a house built on dreams, stained by scandal, and marked forever by the violence that ended it all before it ever truly began.